Hi there, this is Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is On Knit If I Want To, a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am just dripping in knits. It is quite cold here right now, and so I'm taking advantage. I am wearing my tessellated cardi with a jaunty shawl and a Harlow hat. Both the hat and shawl are knit out of my Handspun, making them extra special. And the tessellated cardi is knit up in the Farmer's Daughter O'Dang spin cycle yarns, dyed in the wool, and the Spinster's Daughter, which is just called Spinster's Daughter, the sport weight one. And then I'm also wearing a pair of berry pants. This is a sewing pattern from Style Arc. Unfortunately, you can't see the bottom of them very well, but they are a very cute barrel-like pant. These are one of my top 5 sewing patterns, if not top. I've probably made it the most out of any sewing pattern. I've made them as sweatpants. I've made a bunch of woven pairs, and I love them. I actually was in Portland, Oregon. It would have been going on like 2 years ago, and I tried on this really cute pair of pants that were half black, half white, but they didn't fit. And I love that about making our own clothes, is we might see something we love, but it doesn't fit us, so then we can try and make it ourselves. So that is what I'm wearing today, and let's jump in. First of all, in less than a week, starting Wednesday at 5 p.m. is the Sock Knit Along Challenge. So I chatted about this last week quite a bit, so I won't go too heavy into details. I'm sure I'll be chatting about it next week as well, because we'll be in the throes of it. But just to recap, this is a knit along challenge, meaning we take from Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to Monday noon Eastern Standard Time to try and knit a whole pair of socks. Now, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could knit a pair of socks in a weekend. So first of all, the challenge aspect is just for fun. It can be really fun to try to finish a pair of socks, or in the spring we do a hat in a weekend, especially if you're in a little bit of a knitting slump, because it's kind of exciting. It can be fun to have that challenge aspect to push you to bust out a knit. It's not for everybody, the challenge part of it. If you are like, no ma'am, this is a slow craft, I do not want to be rushed for my knitting, you can 100% still join, have fun in the forums, make friends, chat, cheer each other on, and not stress yourself out about trying to finish the socks. It's just for fun. And this year's pattern is the Ooey Gooey socks. So this is based on my Ooey Gooey Rhinebeck sweater. And I honestly think these might be my most favorite socks I've ever made. And I know that's a really big statement. You know how much I love my DRK Everyday socks. I've knit a dozen pairs of those. But as far as a more adorned pair of socks, the DRK Everyday are just ribbed, great. They fit everyone well, comfy. There's 11 sizes kind of socks. It's a great vanilla style pattern to have tucked away. Those are my go-to. If I just need to throw a pattern on my needles, I'm either doing that or a Harlow, because I love them. They're really soothing to knit. And if I decide I don't need another one, they're a great gift. That being said, I think these ones are so cute on. I love how they turned out. If you've never tried knitting a welt, that is this fun textured ridge that you see right here. And there's just a little bit of color work at the toe and cuff, so nothing too overwhelming, which is nice. And then there's also 2 options. So I have found, chatting with other knitters, that most of us have a preference. We either prefer a toe up construction, so we start down here at the toe, we cast on, work a heel, and then bind off at the cuff. These ones have a Flegel heel, which is one of my all-time favorite heel constructions. While the other group of knitters really prefers cuff down. So they're going to cast on at the cuff, work down the ankle, turn the heel, and then Kitchener stitch this little toe closed. For the cuff down, I did a heel flap and gusset construction, and this can work. I find that this one's maybe a little easier to modify if you find fitting your socks a little bit tricky due to your arch. If you have a really tall arch, you might be a little bit wider in that area, and so you could knit a heel flap a little bit longer to help accommodate fitting right here, like this situation. Or if you have really flat feet, I have flat feet, you could always knit it a little shorter. So I personally think it's easier to modify for fit than maybe this construction. So I don't usually offer both in a pattern. I just had so much fun with this pattern that I was like, I'm gonna cast another and do it the other way. So whichever way you prefer, they're both included in the pattern, and 15% of pattern sales to the end of the month are being donated to Sisters United, which is a nonprofit that my friend Candace from the Farmer's Daughter Fiber started. I have info on that linked below, as well as the pattern for the sock and the Ravelry forum and the Instagram hashtag if you would like to knit along with us. I do already have my yarn picked out. Oh, I'm gonna grab it. I meant to grab it before I started, but it's actually already Friday mid-morning and I'm just now recording. I got back from teaching at Sacred Sheep on Monday. My flight was delayed. Thankfully, it was not canceled, but I got back really late, and it's just one of those weeks, which we all have, where I've just kind of been scrambling and playing catch up all week. So I'm recording this in real time on Friday, and that's okay. I'm doing it. It's getting done. It will be posted today, just a little later than usual. Okay, but here is my yarn for next week. So I don't always get to participate in the knit along and actually knit again, whatever we're knitting. But the years I've been able to have been my favorite years. So I didn't know if I would be able to this year. I actually have 3 designs going right now. I have 2 sweaters and a vest on my needles. And having so much fun with those, which is one of the other reasons why I'm recording this today. I can feel a hair under my glasses. That's gonna drive me bonkers. So anyways, I've been so distracted by those, and I was like, ooh, will I be able to squeeze in a pair of socks? But you know what? I'm gonna try, and if I don't finish over the weekend, that's okay. But part of it was, while I was at Sacred Sheep, I was walking around looking at all the beautiful yarn, and I just couldn't help myself, and I picked out yarn for the knit along. So this is Spin Cycle Yarns dyed in the wool, which I used also in this pair. In this pair, I used up leftover yarn from my Ooey Gooey sweater. I used Dear Diary, and then paired it with Highwood sock yarn from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. So I'm going to use this super saturated, beautiful yarn dyed in the wool. And then that is so bright. I always have to have my computer up because it has your questions. And then this is Bear Paw sock from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. We have used this in previous years. I held 2 strands together and also did a single strand pair of the Bear Paw socks. So those ones are a DK weight version of my DRK Everyday socks. So in one, I marled it using 2 strands of fingering, and then I did another pair for those who don't want to hold 2 strands together and just did straight DK. But I'm going to use, obviously, the sock weight for this pattern. So this is my little pairing. It's going to be moody and very autumnal. And not, this is my color palette. If you could not tell, this is really in my wheelhouse. This is a little moodier, and I think it's gonna be really fun to kind of change up the color palette. So very excited. I was very tempted to cheat and cast on my flight home. I hand wound these bad boys. I feel like I did a real nice job on this one for a little hand wound cake. This one got a little crazy. It's a little funny shape, but I was like, no, Andrea, wait for the knit along. Not that I'm going to win a prize, but I do want to do it with everyone. So I'm really excited for those. All right, I think that is everything about the knit along. Don't ask me what's going on with my hair today. This is just how we're going this week. Okay. Any other things before we start questions? I think that's it for now. Let's jump into questions and see where we get. Question number 1 is a sock question. I have some hand spun yarn that I'd love to use in something like your fun Ooey Gooey sock pattern, but it is not spun from superwash fiber. I've had some socks I made from hand spun yarn in the past that has worn a hole in the heel. Is it even worth investing time in knitting socks made from non-superwash yarn, or do you recommend only using superwash yarn wool for knitting socks? I want to keep making socks, but I want them to last for as long as possible. Have you worn through hand knit socks? How long do your pairs last? So, I don't think it's the superwash fiber that is going to make or break your socks. I think what is more likely helping some sock yarns last longer is nylon. So having nylon added to the fiber content, my phone's wiggling, to the fiber content of your yarn is what is helping to strengthen it to avoid those holes coming too quickly. I have walked holes through machine spun yarn, hand spun yarn, yarn with nylon, yarn without nylon. I've walked through it all. Eventually, there's a good chance your hand knit socks may end up with a hole at some point. It can be really great to learn how to mend little holes in hand knit socks, especially if you wear them a lot. That being said, I have absolutely knit socks with my hand spun, and I don't think I have yet used a fiber that does contain nylon, but quite a few hand dyers do have a base that is oftentimes actually a superwash merino and nylon. So you can definitely get like sock bases from a lot of fiber dyers. So I would recommend trying one of those if you want to try and amp up the strength. Some people will also hold something with their yarn to try and strengthen at least the area of the heel. So that can be, you can hold nylon with it, you can hold silk, help strengthen it. And so you can do some different things like that to try and just reinforce the heel so that it lasts longer for you. Also consider how many plies you're doing and the twist. So if I want to create a stronger sock yarn, I want it to be fairly high twist to help strengthen that yarn. And also I want to use more plies because the more plies, the stronger it's going to be. And I do notice that with how quickly I might walk through a pair of socks. If I have yarn that I am nervous about its longevity, I sometimes I have cold feet, so I sleep with socks on, and I always generally have socks and slippers on around my house. So I will have certain socks that are my house socks. So I'm not putting them in boots and going on my walk. I'm just wearing them around the house, and that's going to help their longevity. So if you're worried, let's say that you have this really special hand spun, you've already spun it, you would love to use it in your Ooey Gooey socks, make those Ooey Gooey socks your house socks or your bed socks. Like I literally always have a pair of hand spun socks rolled up next to my bed because my feet will get cold. But you can do things to strengthen the yarn you're spinning for socks. There are so many articles on it, and there is an entire issue of Ply magazine all about it, which I highly recommend. If you are into spinning for socks, that might be one of my all-time favorite issues from Ply magazine. It's so good. But there's also lots of articles and vlogs and things like that because people love to spin for socks. It's really fun, and it's one of my favorite ways to see how what's going to happen to the color if I'm doing a painted braid. I love using socks for that. Also, one thing you could consider is, let's say you want to use it for the color work. You could only use your hand spun for like the cuff and the toe. especially if this isn't an area you tend to wear out. I never wear out like the ball of the foot, but my husband always does. This is the first spot he wears out. So pay attention to where you notice a hole forming, and that's a good spot to be like, okay, I need this area reinforced, or I'm gonna make sure I always use a little bit of maybe a nylon based sock yarn for that portion of the sock, even if it's just for that part. So if for you it's the heel, where in the heel is it? I have a friend who wears out the back of the heel, where mine tend to wear out like right in here, tends to be where I get it. So this would be a good spot for me to reinforce. So consider that. And you could always, again, use, there are some, if you go back in the episodes, I think if you just do like Andrea Mowry YouTube socks, there is a episode where we chatted about this a lot, and so many people put in like their favorite long lasting sock yarns. So that would be a great one to check out. And even if you just got a ball of that to use for the heel portions of your socks, or to duplicate stitch reinforce those areas of your socks. I'm gonna see if it'll come up this way. I don't know if it will. Okay, I was hoping it would like pop up right away, but so if I find it, I will link it, but we did have a whole chat about it. Okay. Question number 2. What does a knitter mean when they describe a yarn as woolly wool? I was rewatching an older episode, episode 227 to be precise, where you were describing a Harrisville yarn as woolly wool. I realized I don't really know what that means. Can you enlighten me? Is it fiber content, how it's spun, how it feels? So I think for me, I am mostly describing how it feels. I am definitely describing a wool yarn. So this is Harrisville sheer, and for instance, I would describe this as a woolly wool. And I think things that I'm thinking about when I describe it, and I would be so curious, anyone else who has described yarn that way, like, what are you thinking about when you describe it that way? So when I am thinking about a woolly wool, I am thinking about, I think other descriptive words I would use, let's say, is squishy, having like bounce to it, feeling not overly smooth. I'm probably more thinking about woolen spun. Now I'm just like losing all my other descriptive words. I keep wanting to just say woolly. But yeah, more of a woolen spun. This one you can see it's kind of got a matte texture because it's woolen spun, so there's not as much shine. If I were to knit with it, it would be bouncy and squishy and have good memory. This is that yarn knit up compared to this yarn, which I would describe as very soft and drapey, and there's like this halo to it. And then we have this, which again, you know, one of the best ways I can actually think to describe it is it feels closer to what I think it would feel like to pet a sheep. I think that's what I'm envisioning. That's what I'm feeling. If you've ever pet a sheep, like this yarn doesn't feel that far away from how that sheep feels. Like if you've ever pet a sheep, they're surprisingly kind of dense and spongy, but in a really delightful way. So more rustic, so I'm not just, so when I say woolly wool, I am thinking more of like Harrisville woolen spun as opposed to Superwash merino indie dyed, to kind of give a comparison. But I would love to hear other people's descriptors. I love when people ask questions like that, because it's sometimes these things we take for granted, like, oh, this way to use this as a adjective, but not everyone is going to correlate that to other, like, oh, okay, this is what that means. So hopefully I kind of cleared up what I mean by it, but I'm very curious to how other people would describe that. Okay, question number 3. I've never knitted a cardigan, only pullover sweaters. I'm 6 foot tall with a long torso, so I always have to add multiple inches to the length of my sweaters. How do you go about adding additional buttonholes? Math is not my friend. Okay, so a little bit is going to be dependent on what kind of button band is on there. So for instance, this is a button band where you pick up stitches and knit out. And what I would do is, these are evenly spaced buttonholes. So in the pattern, it's going to tell you how many stitches are between, the buttonholes are on this side, but how many stitches are between buttonholes. If you can, I would, to make it really easy, I would try to add like that exact amount of another buttonhole plus the spacing. So let's say that these buttonholes are 12 stitches apart and then the buttonhole is 3 stitches. So we have 15 stitches. So I would need to pick up and knit an extra 15 stitches. So that is how much extra length I would want to add on, just to keep it really easy for myself, or a multiple of that. So like, and I'm trying to think of anything else you might need to know. A vertical button band is generally the same thing. Like I always try to space mine evenly, so then it would just be rows instead of stitches, but you still are gonna pick up the stitches and then you're gonna work, it's like an applied button band. So you would just want to look ahead in your pattern and see how that pattern is spacing out, how far they're spaced out, whether it's rows or stitches, and then how many rows or stitches they use to make the actual buttonhole. And if you can try and add on that amount, that's going to make it easiest for you without having to do a bunch of math. So that is how I would do it. Okay, I love your new Ooey Gooey sock pattern and would love to participate in the knit along. However, I have never knit a pair of socks before. Do you think this pattern would be a manageable first pair? For context, I have been knitting for 5 years and have made a lot of different garments, sweaters, shawls, but am not as advanced with color work. If it would be safer to start with bare paw socks or DRK everyday socks, I can do that and save Ooey Gooey for another time. So I think that if you can do sweaters, you 100% can do socks, no problem. The only difference is you're doing all small circumference instead of having any big circumference like you would do in the body. As far as color work goes, color work on small circumference can be a little bit tricky, but you're only doing it right here and again right here. So it's not a ton of color work. So I think if you do want to do color work in socks, it's actually pretty friendly intro to that. I have found my color work tension, small circumference, really improved when I used the shorty needles. Like Gu has shorties, and I think other brands probably do too. But that really helped. Now, I don't actually love knitting on those needles for the whole sock, so I only use it for the color work portion, and then I just go back to Magic Loop is my go-to. You could also use DPNs, double pointed needles, so whichever you prefer, but I just found that that helped. I do have a video on tensioning color work in small circumference. I can put that in here. Boop. Okay. But if you're nervous, you could absolutely start with the DRK everyday socks. But I really think that if you've done sweaters, you're going to be just fine. Totally fine. Okay, last question. I have a question about gauge. How do you decide the right gauge for a project? I always hear people say things like, choose a gauge or fabric you like, or compare different swatches and say they like this one better. I feel like I can't really tell a difference, or maybe I just don't know what I'm looking for. It's easier to tell if the fabric is too stiff or loose, but what would you be looking for when starting a new project? So if you are following a pattern, the nice thing is the designer's already chosen the gauge that they think that fabric should be knit up at. But if you're trying to just do your own thing, you just want to make something up or not follow a pattern, or maybe you're reading through like an Elizabeth Zimmerman book where she says, find a gauge you like. Part of it honestly comes from experience in seeing what you end up enjoying to wear and how it lasts for you. So one of the things I have found through my years of knitting is I actually don't like things knit at a very loose gauge. One is because of longevity. I find that if a knit garment or shawl, especially like these bigger items, if they're knit too loosely, they stretch over time and they're going to get holes faster. So when we knit them at a bit of a tighter gauge, it's going to help strengthen that project a little bit more. But in my early days of knitting, I used to kind of like go a little too far in that extreme. So it would be like a very stiff fabric, which depending on what part of your body you're planning to wear this item on can be really nice if you don't want like your socks to wear out or you don't want the wind to blow through your hat. Sometimes it's nice to have a tighter gauge mittens, but sometimes for like a cardigan, we don't want it to be a rock solid suit of armor. So I think, but I know other people who absolutely love like way sizing up on their needles and knitting things at a very loose gauge. So it is going to be a bit of personal preference. And I think knitting projects is kind of the best way to figure it out, just because swatches are great and they're going to tell you a little bit, but they're often about this size. And then we're not utilizing them in our everyday life to see how we end up liking that fabric over time. I often say not to judge a project right after you're done knitting it, even after you've blocked it, because wearing it tends to help it settle into itself. And I will find that like the fit of my sweaters changes a little bit after I've worn it for a while. Same with shawls and even hats. Like my hats start to like form to my head and fit better and better the longer I have them. So we break them in. And that is going to tell us over time how much we like the density that we've knit something at, how tight or loose we've knit it at, compared to just a swatch where, I always tend to like do this and be like, oh, what is this drape like? And it's just hard to get the full picture until you really use that item. But thankfully, if you are following a pattern, the designer's already kind of decided for you. And then the more you knit, the more you're going to learn, okay, I tend to be grabbing these items more than these items, or maybe different things. It depends on seasonality and what kind of garment it is. Like shawls, I don't mind having drapier because I want them to drape around my body, where garments, I want them to be hard wearing, and I just don't love a super loose fabric. So that's just my personal preference. So yeah. There you go. I think that, and different yarns. Different yarns are going to react differently being knit up more or less dense. So for instance, I found with Handspun, when I would measure my yarn, I would use my little gauge tool like this, and I would get my wraps per inch, and I would kind of go by the weight of the yarn and how many yards I have, and to try my best to figure out, okay, I think this is about a sport weight or a DK. But what I find time and time again when I am knitting with my Handspun is that yarn does tend to need me to go up a needle size. And I think part of that is because when a person has spun that yarn instead of a machine, there's just this energy that's in it, and I feel like it blocks out, it blooms more. And a lot of that's also going to come down to the type of like the breed of the sheep I'm using, the fiber content. But I have found that a pretty regular thing I need to do with my Handspun is go up a needle size, because it just needs more breathing room than a machine spun yarn that tends to have like to be like squished down more or something. So again, that's just like what I've learned from knitting with it more and more and getting to see how it behaves. Alrighty, I think that is it. I shared what I was wearing, and we have the knit along coming up. So I think that's it for now. I will have another newsletter coming out this coming Tuesday with all of those details for the knit along again. So if you weren't subscribed to the newsletter 2 weeks ago when I released the sock, week before last, I will have all that info going out again, but you can also find it in the Ravelry forum or on my Instagram. But we would love to have you join. It's really fun. We've had people who've done it. This is our 8th year. We've had people who've done it every single year, which is really fun. Some people will post all the socks they've made. So it's fun to see it go throughout the years. Both styles, both construction come with 5 sizes to choose from. And it's just a good time. It's really fun. So we would love to have you join, and I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.